casually get to know more about her and her story after this. Kayak pas kita udah mulai tanya-tanya. So yeah, here as per usual, kalau kalian ada pertanyaan untuk Kak Hillary, bisa scan this QR code or go to slido.com and then put the hashtag workshop 24 June. Nanti Kak Shiva bakal kirim ke chat boxnya the link, jadi kalian bisa langsung pencet terus tanya-tanya di Slido. And then, of course, the two most interesting questions or the two best questions, dua pertanyaan yang paling menarik, nanti bakal dapat a special gift. Hadiah spesial dari kita. Jadi ask away, and I'm pretty sure Kak Hillary would really love to answer your questions. And yeah, she'd be happy to entertain you with them. So if everyone's ready, you have your videos on, ini kita bakal santai banget ngobrol, just casual chat-chat. Nanti kalian kalau ada pertanyaan bisa langsung taruh aja di Slido, put your name, jangan sampai anonymous. Terus nanti kalau biar kita tahu siapa yang tanya dan kita bisa kasih ke gift-nya. And then yeah, you can also raise your hand later if you want to ask a question langsung to the mic to ask Kak Hillary. So without any further ado, Ka, hello.
Hello.
So, yeah, let's just start with like a brief introduction from yourself, about you, about the work you have going on. So yeah, you can just share it.
Sounds great. Makasih, Hanifa. And thank you again, everyone, for being here. Very excited to meet all of you. My name is Hillary. You can call me Hel. Right now, I'm working in an international organization. I work in United Nations atau Kabahasa Indonesia, Perserikatan Bangsa-Bangsa. If you have heard about this organization or this institution, definitely let me know in the chat. But if this is the first time you hear about United Nations, that's also okay. Basically, the UN is one of the oldest and largest international organizations where countries or states who are members of this institution work together to achieve like a global goal, to solve global challenges all together through diplomacy. So I work there. Specifically, I work on the Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. So my office would be the office that holds the mandate that was given by the UN's leader, the Secretary General. Our mandate is on engaging with young people. Jadi, in short, tugasnya kantor aku itu adalah to make sure the UN itu becomes closer with young people like all of you here gitu. Jadi, making the UN a more friendly institution buat anak-anak muda, making it more, making it easier for young people to contribute and work together with the UN through its work, and then obviously to also advocate di PBB lebih banyak lagi kontribusi dan peran anak muda baik lewat staff muda atau lewat partnership sama anak-anak muda di luar institusi ini gitu. Jadi that's kind of the overall view of like what my office is supposed to do. Kenapa the mandate is to engage with young people? It's because the young people that we have in the world today is actually the largest generation ever in history. Jadi you, me, and everyone, maybe I'm a little bit older than all of you, tapi I think I'm still qualified to be called as a millennial, like I guess an older version of millennial. Tapi because there are like 1.8 billion of young people out here. So technically speaking, we are the biggest generation of change makers. And it would be impossible to solve global challenges, to achieve the world's ambition in terms of sustainable development goals by the year of 2030 kalau anak-anak muda itu nggak berkontribusi secara aktif. Jadi makanya the United Nations recognizes the power of young people and really want to engage young people as equal partners into this. Specifically, I work on the issue of innovation and technology. I have to share a disclaimer that I did not come from a tech background or a STEM background. So I'm sure everyone here is more qualified to advise in terms of like how to create apps or code and everything else. And perhaps I should probably also learn from all of you on that. But specifically, my work is to advocate so that young people are consulted, engaged, and as well as partnered with the UN and member states to develop policies that are related to technology and innovation gitu. Jadi jangan sampai nanti perkembangan teknologi, regulasi, policies dan banyak peraturan lainnya itu nggak dibikin bareng anak muda gitu. Jadi jangan sampai anak muda terexclude dari proses itu. So my work is specifically on that, and to also, I guess, just see how the UN can support the work of young innovators like all of you.
Okay, that's really meaningful work that you're doing, and ako senang banget that you're someone who has worked with a lot of youths, dan hari ini kita kan banyak kita hari ini lagi with this summer club juga kan, we want to nurture future female leaders in STEM and basically coba membangun generasi berikutnya untuk yang lebih terbaik, apalagi untuk Indonesia kan ya. Itu. So, I also, given that Kak Hillary tuh kerjanya tuh it's a lot of like social development, I would say. Jadi aku mau lanjut tanya aja Kak, kayak what driven you to work in this type of position, especially in the UN, and what motivated you to do that, basically?
Yes, happy to share about that. It's actually, I guess, kind of a funny story. Jadi aku I didn't come from a tech background. I also did not come from an international relation background. Biasanya kalau orang kerja di PBB atau di World Bank kerjanya mungkin majornya dulu international relation atau HI ya. Yeah. Aku nggak ambil itu. Actually, for my undergraduate, I took business. Like most of all of you here, I think that I was speaking to the girls from Generation Girl, and a lot of them also took business as their major. So I used to study business, and then when I graduated, I worked a little bit in startups as well as in multinational companies. I also did a lot of freelancing in terms of like being a copywriter or like a writer for high-end fashion magazine, and this was when I was younger. So I used to do that for fun, and then the enlightenment came when I was actually writing for an article on like high-end fashion, and then it was talking about branding, and then like all this like marketing and everything else. And then I realized like if I could convince people to be interested in high-end fashion products, for instance, to be interested in big fashion brands, why couldn't I convince them through my writing? Why couldn't I convince people to be interested in things that are good, things that could change society, things that could change the world, like like gender equality, atau poverty eradication, atau like climate change. So I wanted to see that I could use my skills in writing and marketing and I guess business strategies as well, and implement it in other sectors, kayak sectors of development kayak tadi Hanifa bilang gitu. Jadi that's what motivated me first. So I tried that when I was in like briefly after I graduated from undergrad, and then I realized after that apparently it works. It's possible to implement the skills that you gain from a non-development sector, such as business, and then implement it to promote social changes. And then I ended up pursuing that whole career track, and then I did my graduate study on it, on international development and humanitarian action, and then I then landed myself work at the UN, I guess.
Wow. Yeah, so it's interesting that you say that kayak awalnya Kak Hillary itu bantu-bantu tulis-tulis punya punya skill nulis, punya skill marketing untuk fashion kan ya. Untuk fashion blog. Terus you thought about kenapa nggak use this same skill set dan bantu orang untuk lebih tahu, lebih aware tentang hal-hal yang saling membantu society gitu kan ya.
Yes.
Itu kenapa Kak Hillary jadi mau ikut dive into the world of like development and especially youth. Well, actually not this. Actually, let me get into that. Why youth why youth specifically? Like kalau mulai tahu itu kan tadi kenapa in the development sector, but why specifically in the youth-nya? Mungkin what made you want to do that, perhaps?
Yes, that's an excellent question. Ini mungkin lebih curhat kali ya.
Boleh. Safe space.
Jadi sebenarnya gini, kayak kalau tadi aku udah bilang, when I began my interest, I guess, in like the development world, I also realized apparently a lot of the people who work in the development sector, they're very, very senior gitu. Especially kalau misalkan in international organization, in non-profits gitu, like they are experts, a lot of them are seniors and everything else. As a young person, when I think at that time I was like, I don't know, 24, I guess, or 25, I realized kalau misalkan the approach that young people use in solving problems itu very different sometimes with older generation, right? Obviously, all of you here, I think, are living proof of that, how you just like, you started learning new skills, you use like different open source and then other platforms to develop new solutions. So I think our generation is so agile and it's so innovative and creative, and despite our limited resources ya, walaupun mungkin bahkan belum kuliah atau belum S2, tapi they're already taking all this initiative to like be creative and creating solutions. Yeah. Nah, however, it is also very clear that there are structural barriers atau institutional barriers in these sectors yang kadang-kadang anak muda tuh susah gitu kayak mau nyampein idenya, maybe they don't know where to do so. A lot of times in the development world, kalau anak muda mau jadi professional there, they would require you to have 8 years of experience. If you're 22, that doesn't make sense because that means they expected you to work since since you were in high school gitu kali ya, or even before that. And then, so clearly there's a bottleneck, right? That has a lot of barriers that prevented young people from fulfilling their role gitu, like to fully contribute into making social changes. Nah, and then I happened to find the office that I work for, the office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. Itu tuh, they're actually advocating for the UN and its partners to move these barriers away, so there is more connection between more direct connection from global institution to young people directly. Jadi gak sidelining atau excluding young people from the process gitu. And then my office also advocates for a more innovative or progressive way of like partnering with young people. Jadi not always follow this traditional old method of everything has to be, archaic or bureaucratic gitu. So, and then that approach is actually very much welcomed by the UN as an institution itself. Then, as a young person, waktu itu baru graduate nih, I was really able to let them know that one, yes, I'm like a young professional that wants to work in the development sector, And then I have the skills, and then I have the degree, or like the knowledge to contribute positively into this work of the UN that the UN is doing. But
Mhm.
also, most importantly, I'm a young person myself gitu, so I know exactly what young people are struggling with gitu kan.
Yep.
So I like, what's great about it was that I had the chance to really represent my generation then,
Mm,
um,
mm.
to give, I guess, the institution and its partners a real perspective, like what my generation is currently struggling with gitu.
I see. Oke. Jadi karena untuk nge-recap sedikit, jadi karena Kak Hillary sendiri ini juga part of the kaum muda lah ya, kaum muda yang ingin apa ya, ingin ada lebih banyak representasi di di apalagi in systematic changes. Jadi karena a lot of the positions in the development world you said is a lot of seniors, jadi kayak kurang ada perspektif anak muda kan ya Kak. Jadi Kak Hillary lagi coba bantu nah, my Indonesian is also sedikit limited, but I wanted to say like you want to decrease penghabat sistematisnya untuk so that young people have enough platform to have a platform to speak their perspectives. Nah
Ya,
Kak,
betul.
mungkin biar kita bisa dapat gambaran yang lebih spesifik, bisa Kak cerita kayak maybe one of your projects that you've worked on for the youth here in the UN yang kayak bisa or even something that the rookies can also contribute in.
Boleh banget. Iya benar tuh Hanifah. Jadi I guess in short or in summary, tugas aku adalah gimana caranya apa ya, meminimalisasi hambatan gitu buat anak muda untuk contribute ke di UN gitu ya. Kalau misalnya contoh kerjaannya itu, I can bring a few example actually. Jadi in the year 2019 itu the UN itu they highlighted the importance of climate action gitu, and how young people are one of the most affected generation that would have to bear the consequences of climate action gitu kan. If you remember, so this was almost 3 years ago, yeah. But that was the year where Greta Thunberg was really, soaring high, and then she was invited to the UN, and then we finally were able to see a lot of youth activists getting invited to these spaces to speak for themselves. Nah, kerjaan aku tuh salah satunya adalah to fight this wrong stigma that anak muda itu cuma protes doang, karena banyak banget yang mikir kalau anak muda tuh they like to protest tapi they don't give solutions gitu. Padahal in reality we know that's not true. So especially in the climate movement gitu, kayak banyak yang bilang, why are you only doing school strike but you're not contributing to anything? And then me, myself, my office, and everyone knows that's not true. Like, young people are full of ideas and they've been implementing it that way. So what my office did was we created kind of like a climate innovation challenges, as well as hackathons to kind of engage with innovators, specifically young innovators who have ideas or solutions to solve specific climate change challenges gitu, kayak the challenge of not having enough climate information, the change of not having enough good solutions for sustainable fashion, for instance, atau the challenge of not being able to have enough resources or tools or applications or software that could help people in local villages to have good climate informatics gitu. So we hosted like these innovation challenges, and then the winners of this innovation challenges were invited to present their work at the UN in New York. They come from all over the world, from Malaysia, Egypt, the US, Germany, and everything else, everywhere else. And then they presented their work. and then we actually engage with them and then help them connect with like potential mentors or partners gitu yang dari both the UN as well as the UN's partners like uh, like Saka Microsoft or at that time it was also Nike, like all these like different, I guess, private sector institutions who are interested in partnering with young people. So we made sure that there are opportunities for young people to present their work and kind of build that pathway gitu ya, so that they can later on leverage from this exposure, leverage from this opportunity to scale up and improve their work on the ground. So that's one. The other work that I do is actually helping young people to bridge connections in terms of like specifically for young women and girls who are interested in pursuing STEM careers. We all know for sure that the STEM industry needs to do a little better in terms of being more friendly to like young women and girls gitu ya, karena unfortunately even after you work it's so hard to break that glass ceiling gitu. And then we've heard this not only for young women who are just starting their careers in tech or in STEM, but also from senior leader yang kayak udah mungkin bertahun-tahun and they still find it very hard to for the industry to be inclusive towards women gitu. So what we did, we created this program as well. It's some sort of like, I guess, a virtual mentorship connection where we connect young women and girls who are in high school, in universities, to be paired with a senior women leader in STEM through our initiative called the Talking Tech. So they will be paired, and then they were able to connect and then discuss like what the young women and girls are aspiring to achieve in terms of STEM, and then the senior leaders would be able to advise them like you should, these are the steps that you could take, like here are the opportunities within my network that you could tap into. So basically it's building intergenerational mentorship in short. And that program itself, it's still ongoing. It was created to celebrate the Girls in ICT Day 2 years ago, and it's still ongoing. I think right now we have, for instance, like young women who would be paired with former astronauts from NASA. We would have young women who would be paired with like the director of GSMA, and it's a wide range of women in different STEM fields, just to also show them that there are more to STEM than the obvious career choice gitu. And yeah, if you're ever interested in taking part in that, I'd be more than happy to share about it. I've shared it with Hanifa as well, so maybe later on, Hanifa, you can extend the opportunity to the girls here.
Yes, aku bakal nanti sebut lagi itu tadi Kak Hillary just gave us a sneak peek atau apa nanti yang kita mau kasih tahu. Okay. Jadi I really appreciate your work, dimana kayak jadi kita karena anak muda tuh sering banget dilihat kayak banyak ngomong, gak banyak bisa dilakuin gitu, tapi your work is to provide, kayak memberikan semua anak muda ini platform untuk menunjukkan kapabilitas kita sebenarnya kan. Dan apalagi tadi Kak Hillary sebut nama-nama company besar gitu kan ya. Terus juga I really like that term, intergenerational mentorship. Itu menurut aku penting banget juga, karena kayak emang kalau kita mau membangun anak muda yang lebih untuk mengajarkan anak muda skill-skill yang diperlukan gitu-gitu, dan itu memang perlu diajarin kan ya. And I think mentorship is more than like it's more than like a teacher and student kind of thing. It's definitely two-way, like mentor and mentee type of relationship, where like saling belajar dan saling memberikan advice gitu-gitu. And I think in a way this right now it's also kind of like this program right now is definitely a kind of almost like a mentorship program as well. So kayak aku setuju banget kalau misalnya anak muda itu diberikan platformnya, nanti we're like one step closer to making more systematic and social changes. Ya, gitu. So I hope that kalian ini semua juga ter tergerak, sorry, moved into making your own changes. So speaking of which, aku mau tanya satu pertanyaan lagi, terus nanti baru kita I'll bring up some questions from Slido. We have quite some questions here. So yeah, aku mau tanya Kak, how important is social awareness to you? And how important should it be for the next generation? Like seberapa pentingnya itu kesadaran sosial untuk kakak dan seberapa pentingnya itu untuk anak-anak muda kita sekarang?
Thanks, Hanifa. Sebelum aku jawab pertanyaannya, mungkin tadi Hanifa actually brought a very good point that I forgot to mention on. Tadi Hanifa bilang kalau misalkan, bisa belajar bareng through mentorship. I think it's also important for us to remember kayak gak cuma anak muda yang belajar dari teman-teman senior, tapi juga senior juga of course belajar dari anak-anak muda. Like I think just because we're young doesn't mean that we don't have anything to share. And then it's very, I guess, optimistic to see like how many intergenerational partners out there atau kayak senior partners out there yang very keen to open their arms, open like the opportunity to hear and take the feedback from anak muda gitu. And then on social awareness, I think tadi apa pertanyaannya, seberapa penting ya?
Ya, seberapa penting?
Menurut aku ya jelas penting banget ya. Tapi mungkin to simplify it, mungkin gini kali. Kalau aku sih mikirnya gini, sekarang nih kayak aku, Hanifa, dan semua teman-teman di sini, we're very fortunate, right? Bisa kayak belajar bareng di janji, di summer club, bisa punya good internet access, punya computer buat kayak belajar rame-rame dan develop new skills, saling sharing knowledge and everything else. I think it's very important to understand how that itself is a privilege gitu. Bisa ngobrol kayak gini aja, it's a privilege of itself in many places around the world. Unfortunately, masih banyak teman-teman, young women and girls who wouldn't even be allowed to have access to these things or even talk about these things, or even they wouldn't even dare to pursue a career atau kayak education in STEM fields gitu, sayangnya ya. So I think social awareness atau kayak being able to be aware of our privileges, it really helps of understanding what we have and what other people don't have.
Yeah.
And most importantly, how do we make sure that with our capacity, with like our skills, our network, our creativity, we can help to bridge those gaps and make sure that we can help other people to also transition to a place where they would be able to have access to these things gitu. Jadi I think social awareness itu penting karena kalau people don't care about social awareness, if they're ignorant, for instance, it would be impossible to create chain of reactions of good impact gitu. The people wouldn't want to be mindful of other people than themselves. People would only then focus on their own interests, and then obviously as social beings gitu, it's impossible for us to live like that karena at the end of the day our day-to-day life, our world is very much connected gitu. My choice of action both online and offline, it really helps shapes a whole it will really help shape societies gitu. Kayak for instance, like apa ya contohnya? Like if you choose to educate yourself about climate actions, for instance, and then if you choose to share about the news about climate crisis and everything else online, it is as simple as like you clicking a share button. Tapi actually, it helps influence other people to be more aware of it. And then, so I think being socially aware, it also means that not only that you're aware of your privileges and what you can do to bridge gaps to those who are not privileged enough, but also understanding how each of your action matters. And then there's always an opportunity in every single of your decision to build that social change gitu. So hopefully, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's I think that's why it's important gitu.
Yeah, no, I think it makes complete sense. Jadi kayak kita tuh harus sadar apa ya, kayak keberuntungan kita sendiri sekarang, dan tapi juga harus sadar nggak semua orang tuh kayak kita sekarang punya akses-akses tertentu ke pelajaran, ke healthcare, you know. So especially kayak pandemi gini kan ya. Jadi kita harus sebagai humans and social beings, kita harus bantu satu sama yang lain, dan decreasing that inequality gap, right, of privilege in a way. And juga kalau misalnya kita malah ignorant dan tidak punya kesadaran ini, jadi bakal lebih susah untuk bikin susah untuk terus menerus saling membantu gitu lah ya. Kayak I like that word you said, chain of reaction of impact. Yeah, I like that. Kayak biar kita makin terus bantu-bantu aja terus yang orang lain, dan selain cuman punya kesadaran juga harus ada action ya kan ya, even if it's just as simple as sharing on your Instagram, letting everyone know what's going on in the world. So yeah, okay. And I think now I'm gonna give a chance for ini udah ada yang raise hand sih. Okay, sekarang let's just get into the Q&A rookie session. So tadi Marsha udah mau nanya, jadi maybe we can hear from her first. So then you can unmute and say hi to Kak Hillary and ask her
Hey,
question.
Kak Hillary. So I have a question. Tadi aku juga udah kirim di chat. I'd like to ask about cancel culture because these days you see that banyak anak muda yang nge-cancel another creator gitu, padahal mereka nggak tahu case-nya kayak gimana aslinya. And creatornya ini apparently juga sama-sama anak muda, but yeah, keburu dituduh gitu. To the point they do not have any platform gitu, just because of a simple or even unnecessary mistake. How do you deal with this? Thank you.
Makasih Marsha. I think it's a very timely question ya. Maksudnya it's very relevant buat kita yang mungkin sering aktif di sosmed, especially. I mean, I think if I answer, I would answer in my personal capacity ya. Maksudnya ini perspektif aku aja, so take it with a grain of salt. Jadi just take it with a grain of salt when when hearing my answer. Menurut aku, what's great about our generation right now itu kita emang very outspoken ya. We're not afraid of holding each other accountable. Kalau misalkan we think it's wrong, we're not afraid to point that out gitu. So I think it's brave and that's great. While holding each other accountable is important, I think what sometimes people forget is that we need to also one, understand context like you said, and then second, leave room for growth gitu. Karena at the end of the day, like you said, right, you wouldn't be able to understand the full picture of whether or not this person, where did the actions came from, like where did the actions come from, what kind of knowledge or education or exposure that they've got first before they made these decisions gitu. So I think unfortunately with the world that we're living right now, where whenever we post things, it stays online forever. Our digital footprint is forever there, whether we like it or not. And I think this is also a concern ya buat anak muda everywhere gitu. I think what's in, like it is also our role nih as netizens of the world atau kayak teman-teman pengguna social media to one not jump into conclusion before we give verdict or like before we before we judge other people gitu. Like, well, ideally we shouldn't judge other people in the first place. Tapi maksudnya kayak I think it's important to not jump on trends without actually doing research about this person who might, you know, is going through a cancel culture phenomenon or something like that. Karena kadang-kadang mungkin tempted kali ya, mungkin kayak it's very easy to be tempted to like follow this social media arguments about this, but I think it's important for us to also have our own opinion based on our own research gitu. If you think like you've done that and then this person ended up like, you know, like this person who's like being canceled or is going through like a cancel culture phenomenon is not deserving the justice that they're or like not deserve, like, sorry, if this person who's going through a cancel culture phenomenon is not given the opportunity to justify or to share their perspective, I think it is apa namanya our rights juga ya to give them the opportunity to explain about how did they get there in the first place gitu. Karena kamu bilang tadi kan kayak mungkin people just don't want to see the context first, they just like jump on the trend gitu. I think while we cannot control the behaviors of other people online, I think we can always control our behavior, right? So I think what's most important is for us to make it our own responsibility first to one, do our research about it, see if there are opportunities to hear as well how did that happen in the first place and understand the bigger context. And then personally, like I think it's important to leave room for growth and improvement and second chances gitu, karena not everybody, nggak semua orang itu terlahir woke ya. And I think like even from like personally speaking, for me I'm still learning every day by myself as well gitu. There's so many things that I have to constantly learn and unlearn to one understand that apparently like am I doing enough, if whether or not what I did, you know, in the previous days, month, years, were they were like you know, like whether or not they have reflected my new knowledge about, you know, all these like social issues gitu. Karena you can't expect everyone to have to know everything about social justice, to know everything about human rights, but it's important for us, I think, as a person to make sure that we constantly give room for learning and unlearning on that gitu. Unfortunately emang tapi kita nggak bisa control other people's behavior sih ya, jadi ya I think while that itself it's harder to shape or to I guess to manage or control, like I think it will be wiser if we focus at least in our own action gitu.
Yeah, very well said. Does that answer your question, Marsha?
Well, it kind of answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I like the two things that you said about context and giving room for growth, because I think it's so easy for us to point others' mistakes, but then like it's how to say, we do still give room for them to like learn or teach. Kita juga nggak cuma saling pointing fingers, you know, but also kita sendiri harus belajar konteksnya juga sebelum taking action into anything. So, or jumping into trends, doing our research basically. So yeah. Next question kita ada Dayu mau raise hand. Silakan Dayu.
Hi, Kak. So I asked this question in Slido, but like, how has the pandemic influenced the work in the UN, especially like your projects? Because it's harder to do social missions, like because of health protocols and restrictions, and also, like you also said that there's still a like a gap in privilege, like technology, like some people cannot have technology, and yeah, that's question, and also like how do you think like the industry, not the industry, but like the environment will change in the future, like after this pandemic? I also have the second question. Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
Like, what advice would you give for the youths that are trying to be change makers? Like, yes.
Thanks, Dayu. Also excellent questions. In terms of how the pandemic has influenced my work specifically, well, because my office is actually a pretty small office. Yeah, a lot of what we do is advocacies and missions, like you said. So in pre-pandemic times, the envoy on youth, the envoy would travel to like different places, like for instance, refugee camps or places where it's most vulnerable, to consult with young people there, like how their experience have been, to take their inputs and feedback back to our work in the UN. Obviously, because of pandemic, that couldn't happen. I think definitely we're missing that opportunities to connect with young people on the ground, because as you are very much aware of, yeah, unfortunately, the young people that could engage right now are the privileged ones who have access to internet quotas, to phones, and Wi-Fi or technology, right? But those who, for instance, indigenous youth, mungkin, like it would be very hard for them to like engage with the UN and other institutions because first of all, most of them perhaps don't live in urban areas, so it's already hard for them to like go to the cities and then get a good connection. So it's definitely a challenge on that end. And then as I think you also briefly mentioned, like there are still apa ya, technology gap gitu kan ya, like I think to 360 or 300, almost 340 million of young people too, they're still like offline gitu, so it's a real gap for sure. However, what we're trying to do in the UN is that there's a lot of coalition and partnership, not just within the UN agencies, tapi juga with member states and private sectors to bring connection to these places gitu. Because at the end of the day, it's local governments that, and then also like partners like from the private sector and academia that will be able to help channel resources to address these challenges gitu. So through different coalitions of, there's this thing that's called the Digital Cooperation Roadmap. We've identified kind of the different steps and actions that partners from different sectors or industry need to take to make sure that this gap could be seized right away. So in a sense, that's like how diplomacy works, right? Like we convene and we see like how we can work together to solve this challenge. So even though it's pandemic, this conversation and this work that the coalition does is still ongoing, obviously, because we can't afford to pause that work. And then for the past year, this work has been done obviously virtually because unfortunately the headquarters in New York, we weren't able to go into the office because of the pandemic, and it was really bad last year there. So we went to like lockdowns and everything else. So we did everything virtually, but it didn't really, I think what's good is that it did not stop the work and the process, but being able to tune in online or like hosting this conversations, dialogues, and negotiations and collaborations online, it actually provides opportunity for this dialogues to be more open for young people gitu. In the past, usually if young people want to speak to member states representatives, to world leaders in the UN, they would have to fly, right, to New York or to Geneva. And then a lot of times they would have to mobilize their own funding. Not a lot of young people would get sponsors from government or other partners to go there. And then obviously it's very financially difficult, right? Like visa, air tickets, and everything else. So obviously there's not a lot of young people that could come in there because of this like financial and logistical barriers, but because of the pandemic, and everybody now has to, talk through Zoom and then online meetings. That also means we could demand that these conversations online could be open for participants from civil society, like youth organizations and everything else. So the increase of online participation for young people to engage with the UN, I think it has increased significantly. Unfortunately, ya, emang itu ya, mas. Tapi you have to address that yang bisa tune in ya, those who have access to computer and technology and internet gitu. Tapi in that sense, it opens a lot more opportunities for young people in the global south, who are far from the headquarters to take part in this conversation. For example, the UN tuh ada namanya Ecosocute Forum, so it's the Economic Social Council. Every year we host like a forum specifically for young people so that they could discuss the different sustainable development goals that are related to economic and social affairs. And then every year, there will be like around, I would say 1,000 young people or more coming to the UN to spend like 3 days there to, share their intervention, speak to member states, governments, and representative from the UN as well. In the past, we could only accommodate like mungkin 1,000 young people coming into the UN and take part in this forum. Tapi last April, we did the first ever virtual version of the forum, and we were able to engage 19,000 young people. And obviously that's very different, right? Like from 1,000 to 19,000. They were able now to really listen to the conversation. They were able to share their work, like through the giving the examples of their work and questions to the moderators. So it's not a perfect model of participation. I think we all have to acknowledge that, obviously, but I think it does give room of optimism. Yeah, gitu, it's more. It presents opportunity to be more inclusive. So hopefully that answers in terms of how the pandemic has influenced our work. And then I forgot your next question.
What advice would you give?
Oh, yes. I think the advice would be to start with yourself. There's no need for you to move mountains that are beyond your capacity if that will only burden you. Kayak aku mikirnya sih selalu kayak always reflect on what added value you can bring as a person gitu. Not necessarily always, it doesn't necessarily mean like you have to be a genius in coding or you have to be super great at data forecasting or something like that, But it's important for you to understand what unique value you could bring to each conversation, to each process. Maybe you're a creative person and then you maybe you're a creative person that could come up with viral TikTok trends. I don't know. And then apparently that could help institutions promote issues like climate crisis, for instance, to be more engaging for Gen Zs and millennials out there. That's an added value, and maybe that's unique to you because you're a generation Z yourself. So I mean, I would say like always reflect and start with yourself first, and then see what you can do within your capacity. And then if you think there like you could have done more and you should have done more, always map out the steps that you can take in terms of how you can always develop and redevelop your capacities and improve them. The second advice would be when you walk into spaces where like maybe you're invited to share about your skills, or maybe you're invited to do a project or share about your experience as a young person and or share your perspective as a young person about like a social issue. Always walk into these spaces with the mindset of like I'm opening the door to this space so that not only me, but more young women and girls and other young people can also walk into this room after me. So that way, I think like the way I used to think, or like I used to tell myself, is that for one, like opportunity that I'm given to like speak about my experience, I should also then at least try to make sure that five other young people or like five other young women can be a part of this network or can walk into the spaces as well after me. So I think that's important because that way you're definitely continuing the change of reaction. But I think it's also a reflection that you're not afraid to share opportunities. And then in a world where people are always competing to be the best out of everything, it's important to remember that at the end of the day, there's no need for you to apa ya to 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 hold other, like there's no need for you to keep opportunities only for yourself, because then when other people can also benefit from it gitu. So never be discouraged to open spaces for more people, I would say gitu.
Thank you, and I hope that answers your question, Dayu. That was a lot of insights right there. Reflecting, starting with yourself, and I love that we shouldn't be afraid to share our opportunities with others and paving the way. So, yeah, thank you. So, kita ada 2 pertanyaan lagi di raise hand. Jadi semoga, but we also have limited time, so I hope that we can go through these questions. Kita mulai dari Alfia dulu ya. So Alfia, you can unmute and say hi.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. So actually, I'm asking on my Slido too. I want to asking, as the person who have a mission to advocate in terms of technologies, what is the current struggles for youth, especially in the especially for implementing policies in the third world countries? How do you guys working with the government or the community inside? That's the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfia. Also, excellent question. I'll try to answer this as best as I can. Tapi in reality, the regulations and laws and guidelines in terms of innovation and technology, unfortunately, it's very gray. Masih abu-abu banget ya. Jadi there's still so many rooms for us to figure out like what should we do with it, like what do we need to be mindful of. Then ini this is not this is not a new phenomenon karena kan obviously this comes because technology is always updating itself gitu. Facebook 10 years ago and Facebook now is a whole different, it's a whole different product if you can tell, right? So I think that's also the unique challenge of working in innovation and technology space, because that also means you need to constantly think about how the regulations and guidelines, if any, itu always 20 steps ahead of the product update, which is why it's important for policymakers and people who work in developing these guidelines itu to work closely with the industry that produces these products gitu. Jadi nggak bisa siloed and just work by themselves, and then people who work in policy assume that they know everything about it. Karena at the end of the day, they really have to also talk, right, to the people who make these technologies, and then seeing what direction they would want to like take it to, and then map out kind of like the potential or like like what could happen in the future. But what's also interesting and what's also important is that for policies, any policies really, but specifically innovation and technologies, it's very hard to implement or mainstream human rights into the development of technologies in the first place. Not because it's hard, because it's impossible to do, but it does take a lot of process to make sure that human rights is mainstream in a way that's not tokenistic and in a way that's meaningful gitu. As you often know, kaya maybe people create technology with good intent, but sometimes the utilization of these technologies are really up to the users, right? So you can't really always guarantee whether they're going to use it for good or not. So that's why having a rights-based approach, or like a technology that is rights respecting towards human rights, is important. And then that is why having initial conversations with industry leaders to make sure that their current products, their new products, everything that they're going to develop later, it will follow this human rights guideline. And then unfortunately, it's like at the moment we're still learning as we go. Like it's very hard to figure out a global standard that could fit into like all of this different technology regulations all over the world, because the way they treat technology in one region might be different than the way they treat technology in another region, right? Like laws and regulations of GDPR in Europe, for instance, is definitely different than what we have here. So, but the idea is to make sure that by the very least, the innovation and technology it should be designed in a way that's price respecting, and then it's also a human-centered design. So like it's a human-centered approach as well. I don't know if you had the chance of learning this principle of innovation, but I'm more than happy to share the link after this. But basically, it really shows how innovators, technology makers, people who are in charge with policy in relation to this, have to really be mindful of the influence that they could create. So that's one, I guess, kind of the challenge. The other challenge is that a lot of times when technologies are created and policies are created as well, you can't, we unfortunately there's still a lot of like technology development and policy development that is not consultative in its process gitu. Kayak misalkan kayak if you see a lot of technologies, and I'm sure you can find like millions of TED Talks about this, like how products like phones are developed, for instance, like smartphones are developed, itu like perhaps they don't always cater to the need of, like, for instance, women, or cater to the need of people with disability gitu. And then that could happen because basically maybe when they're designing these products, when they're designing this application, they were not doing consultation with the people who might be using this technology in the first place gitu. Maybe all of the engineers are men, so that they wouldn't know that apparently women have different different approach in using this technology, for instance. Atau yang paling gampangnya, the most common I guess one loophole, tapi kayak the most common thing that people often forget, for instance, when you're designing a website, did you really like have you tried to make it accessible so that young people mungkin visual impairness, or like young people with disability can access them very easily? And then even if you follow the guidelines, have you consulted with them, like, to see if it really works? So I think that consultative process is very important. And then I guess part of what we're trying to do is to make sure that young people as like one of the groups that are most affected by this is consulted in the process, both on the policy side, but also we're asking partners and industry leaders to make sure that when you're developing technology later, please make sure that you also consult with you.
Thank you for that. So, thank you, Alfia. So, girls, mau kabarin aja kita extend sekitar 5-10 menit ya. So, like, we can address the last question, which is from Kak Arina tadi. Wait, I think you want to raise your hand?
Oh yeah, sorry. I thought the time was up. So.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Okay.
Last question from you. It's okay.
Okay, so I don't think it should be too long because you touched upon it in the previous questions. So my question is, what do you think is the biggest struggle for young people when trying to innovate and create better change for the future? But what I want to specify here is what we should do, because I think you touched upon what the UN would do. So yeah, I would like to hear about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Karina. And I think it's also encouraging to hear that you're excited to to figure out what you can do after this. So I think that's very exciting to hear it, and hopefully, people, the girls here from Generation Girls Summer Club could come up with like innovation and solutions and everything else to like um, contribute to the global goals. The biggest challenges I would say is resources, because a lot of time young people again they haven't worked full time, for instance, they're still in school, so a lot of the financial resources or infrastructure to help them, uh, such as like misalkan kayak access to computers and other technology tools and platforms is not always easy, I think, especially if you don't live in urban areas. And again, the financial constraint, I think, is the one challenge that every single young person I've met have talked to me about. Um, and I think the other challenge as well is that being able to find partners or being able to find supporters that would want to partner with young people equally gitu. Jadi not those who just want to partner for young people with young people because they think it's cool or it's gonna make them look better, kind of like a greenwashing situation when they're just partnering with youth so that they look like they're relevant or to win the young people's heart or something like that. But I think it's pretty it's a challenge that I find young people have often expressed, that they want partners that treat them as an equal partner, to treat them as expert as well, despite the fact that they are young. And this is what I guess what we've been advocating to partners in industries and governments as well. Like when you're partnering with young people, you have to make sure that they're you consider them as experts, gitu, not just not just seeing them as beneficiaries, gitu. So in terms of what you can do, I would say that I guess when you're creating innovations and you're creating solutions, never be afraid of one, of trial and error, obviously. But second of all, never be afraid to put it out there. Like sometimes, I don't know, like if this applies to everyone, but I think when I was a younger person, I often find it very apa ya. I would be very nervous in putting my solutions or my ideas out there, just because maybe perhaps I wasn't sure if people were gonna like it, or I wasn't sure if people want to help it, or something like that. So my advice is that even if you have a solution, or like an innovative idea or something, don't be afraid to put it out there to see and make a call to everyone else, and see who would want to help you, because sometimes people don't realize that there are partners out there who would want to help, but they just don't know who needs their help gitu. Jadi like a lot of the other things that I've heard is that from different from industry leaders or like from multi-stakeholder partners, they want to engage with young people, but they don't know where they are. Like they don't know how to reach them gitu. And then makanya kayak I think putting yourself out there, building networks, and always sharing about your work, even though it's still in development, atau mungkin even if it's not reaching its mature phase yet, I think it's helpful, because then you would then continuously make yourself open for collaboration, and then make people are aware that you're actually working on this gitu. So, and then that goes as well with the UN. Like for instance, if you have built a solutions or like an innovation, do a lot of research as well in terms of like what available programs are there. Maybe not just from the UN, maybe it's from the nonprofit world, or from the government, or from academic institution that could help you bring these solutions forward gitu. Karena sebenarnya if you take a look at it, there's a lot of accelerator programs. There's a lot of mentorship programs. Some even have like funding opportunities as well for young people to tap into gitu. But obviously, like you would need to do research on this, and then it would be impossible for you to just like for you to get your solutions out there if you don't again like actively research what different opportunities that could help you scale up or share this to like a wider network. So but yeah, like again, I think like the most important part is like don't be hesitant to put your solutions out there and like ask for support from different institutions.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for that answer. And I hope that answers your question, Karina. Basically, to everyone, don't be afraid to show your ideas, show your work, write a blog post. There's so many platforms available for that. Share your ideas from Generation Girl that you learn also. Kaya, you're learning a lot. There's so much platforms and facilities available for you guys, girls. So yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. And sorry banget girls that kita nggak bisa ke Slido-nya karena waktunya sudah habis. Tapi I think most of the questions udah di-address dari Slido through the raise hand. And then yeah, Kak Shiva mungkin boleh bantu. Yes. So yeah, I just want to say thank you so much, Ka Hillary. And I want everyone else to also say thank you to Ka Hillary by unmuting. So like can unmute and say thank you, Ka, or say in the chat as well for coming here and sharing your story and answering our questions. So okay, everyone's saying in the chat.
No, thank you as well, everyone, for having me, and then for the great question. It was very wonderful to hear from all of you.
Yeah, I really like how everyone's so excited to ask so many questions and really thoughtful questions as well. So yeah, and nanti kita kabarin lagi about the gift. So yeah, nanti we're gonna have a lunch break. So oh yeah, we're gonna come back at now is wait, it's like 1 might okay 12. So 1. Yeah, we're gonna come back at 1. Nanti dan jangan lupa booking office hour kalian. Sorry. Kalian lunch breaknya sampai jam 1. Terus nanti jangan lupa booking office hour kalian di peak time, nanti datang. Terus besok kita mulai lagi jam 10 pagi di kelasnya, and don't forget to fill in the happy form, and we really love and appreciate your feedback. So and finally, as to close it off, we do the official Zoom picture. As per usual, the Zoom photo taking session, and I think Flo is gonna help me take the picture. So everyone, please turn on your cameras. We wanna take a picture. Terus nanti kalian
Karena page-nya banyak, aku foto yang first page dulu ya.
Okay.
Ditahan. 1, 2, 3. Second page. One more. Sebentar. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kak Hillary. I hope you all learned a lot. So yeah, have a good lunch, everyone. Have a good rest. Sorry I got extend dikit, but I love the excitement today. So see you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you semua.
Well,
Thank you Hanifa, thank you Kak Hillary.
Okay, thank you.
Kita ketemu lagi jam 1 ya guys.
Iya.
Bye-bye.
Mentor TA volunteer kalau mau istirahat dulu, makan siang dulu boleh banget. Nanti kita balik lagi jam 1 ya. Semangat. Bye, sampai ketemu besok jam 10 kita kelas.
Ra, boleh di